Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And the 2045 season is about to get underway. Lost on opening day, unfortunately, 3-2 to the Braves. And as the season begins, we are missing our starting first baseman, shortstop, and second baseman in Jim Reichert, Damani Essien, and Ramiro Medina. The utility outfielder Edgar Canales also hurt, but Edgar Canales should be back hopefully by mid-April, and even Medina should be back with us before the end of the month. Reichert and Essien both dealing with broken bones in their elbows, going to be out for the next 3 to 4 months. Perhaps we'll see Reichert about the All-Star break, and would be great if Essien was back in August. The goal for this team, which is certainly looking to make an 18th consecutive playoff berth, is to hopefully get to the All-Star break above 500 and in the hunt for a wild card, and then hopefully play better in the second half of the year when, unless more injuries strike, we think we'll be putting the team on the field that we intended to be putting on the field when spring training began. And we're off to a 3-3 start in the very early stages of this season. Edgar Canales now ready to come back from his injury. And we are going to move on from Shamar Jenneret, the 40-year-old former two-time World Series MVP for us. Just 1 for 11 with 6 strikeouts in those 11 at-bats. Only set to play against left-handed pitching and wrecked physically. He brings absolutely nothing to the table defensively at this point. And if we're going to move on from one aging left-handed 40-year-old player who we're only playing against left-handed pitching, it's certainly not going to be Deshaun Seifu, who also in 11 at-bats is 4 for 11, and he's got 3 steals on the year already. Admittedly, a tiny sample size for each of them. We'll see if Jenneret will accept a demotion to AAA. I'm guessing he probably will not. Yeah, he refuses to be demoted, so we are just going to go ahead and release Mr. Jenneret to make a space for the roster on Edgar Canales. It's just hard for me to justify keeping Jenneret around with what his bat is at this point. Certainly wouldn't mind if there were a scenario where we could keep him around and try to get him some at-bats to hit the milestones that he is closing in on. You look at his career now, and he's only 9 home runs away from 500, 21 hits away from 2,500. But I don't think even if he continues to play for us every 4th or 5th day against left-handed pitching, and he's been fortunate that we faced 3 left-handed pitchers already in the first 6 days of the year. So he's probably gotten a little more playing time than I would normally expect him to. But even if he plays with us for an entire season, I think he'd likely get the 21 hits needed to get to 2,500. I don't think he's going to play enough and be effective enough to get the 9 homers that he needs to get to 500 for his career. So we are going to go ahead and move on from Mr. Jenneret. Thank him for his service to our team, especially a decade ago when he was the National League MVP. But time moves on, and we'll see whether maybe both Jenneret and Seifu end up retired after this season. And even better than releasing Jenneret and having to eat his contract, we found a deal for him. We get $100,000 in return, and we also get a 38-year-old pitcher, Austin Nye, who is signed to a minor league contract, but does generally have some pretty positive personality traits. We'll likely stash him in the minors, where he probably won't be thrilled to be, but at least we're getting a little bit in return for Jenneret. We're getting that salary off of our books for the remainder of the year, and we're opening up a spot on the 40-man roster as well as the 26-man roster, although the 26-man roster spot will be filled with the return of Canales. And unfortunately, Ramiro Medina still struggling to recover from that strained PCL. His recovery time likely going to be pushed back another couple of weeks. Still conceivable that we'll have him back in the majors before the end of the month, but at this point we're 4-4, kind of holding our own, and we can kind of remain about 500 without him. He'll hopefully provide a nice boost to the lineup once he is back. And we're closing in on the end of April and playing pretty good given the significant injuries that we faced. A 15-9 record, first place in the NL East. Ramiro Medina has been healthy now. He's played 5 games, just 3 for 17 in AAA Albany, but think that that's probably enough for him to have knocked the rust off. So we're going to bring him back and put him into our starting lineup as our second baseman. That'll allow us to move Danny Ferguson over to third, which will strengthen us defensively as well. And then we're just going to have to make a decision as to Mike Frank and Steve Nickel, who's going to remain with us. Mike Frank hitting just $154 and 65 at-bats. He's certainly not a starting quality major league player on a good team, and he's been below replacement level thus far. Does still have 1 option year left. Steve Nickel, less playing time, hitting .207 and 29 at-bats. He's also been a well below average offensive player, about replacement level though. Nickel also has 1 option year left, so they both could go down to the minors. Although we've been given more playing time to Mike Frank, he's the guy that we're going to try to demote. Just think that Nickel's overall defensive versatility and his higher range, higher error, and higher turn double play ratings make him somewhat more useful as a potential utility infielder for us. And we won our final game of April to get to May 1st with a 16-9 record. That puts us tied for first in the NL East with the Washington Nationals, although we are percentage points ahead of them in the standings. Taking a look at the leaderboard, had a couple long hitting streaks with Ishmael Velasco and Josh Porter. Jim Coles, the rookie pitcher, off to an exceptional start, leading the National League with a 0.90 ERA, tied for second in the league with 4 wins. Coles also has that captain personality, which is helpful with Deshaun Seifu, who is not an everyday guy anymore, being the only other captain personality that we have on the team at this point. Struck out 30 in his first 30 innings of full-time starting major league work, almost a win above replacement at this point. And with the strong start to his season, Coles picked up a couple of awards. He was named the Pitcher of the Month in the National League, and he was also named the National League Rookie of the Month for the month of April. Taking a look at our team statistics, the 16-9 record, right in line with Pythagorean expectations, and particularly with the fact that we've been missing some key offensive players this year. Not a shock that our offense has not been great. We rank 14th in the National League in runs scored, 14th in home runs. You can see we're in the bottom half of the league in just about every batting category, the exception being strikeouts, where we strike out less than anybody else, somewhat surprisingly. We're also still a pretty good team in terms of stolen bases and base running. But our pitching, as it has been for most of the past decade and a half, best in the National League, number 1 in runs allowed, just 72 runs allowed through our first 25 games. Starter ERA of 2.42, bullpen at 3.21, and you can see we are in the top handful of the rankings in pretty much every pitching category in the National League. Also fourth in defensive efficiency and fourth in zone rating. Hopefully, the return to the lineup of Medina will give us some help offensively. Still 2 months away from Riker, 3 months away from Essien. Riker, in particular, is expected to be a big boost to our offense when he gets back. Probably not going to have him until about the All-Star break, as we've discussed. But if we can continue to play baseball at an over 600 rate, thanks to our great pitching, probably don't need to do anything too dramatic right now to try to improve the offense. And given that we brought Deshaun Seifu back for a final go-round with us, we'll check in on him at a pretty regular basis. He's going to be turning 41 in just over a month. He's done pretty well for us this year, just 5 starts. So although we did have those 3 starts for both him and Jenneret the first week of the season, only faced 2 lefties since then, unfortunately. 7 for 17 on the year, 3 runs scored, 3 doubles, and 3 stolen bases. So when we take a look at his batting stats, he's 8 hits away from 2,000, 2 doubles now away from 700, 5 stolen bases away from 1,300. We would think that he'll get to all of those round numbers this year. Whether or not he'll be able to come up with the 4 triples to get to 200 in his career is certainly much more of a doubt. And we've simmed ahead a couple of weeks to mid-May, not playing quite as well. 21-16 record. We're a game behind the Nationals, half a game behind the Braves. When we look at the wild card, we're half a game ahead of the Diamondbacks, Marlins, and Giants for the final 2 wild card spots in the National League. So doing fine given the fact that we're missing our best defensive player who plays the most important defensive position at shortstop, and the guy who we think is likely to be our best offensive player in Riker, our young first baseman. So certainly holding in there. Will there become a point when we might want to make a trade? Certainly. We've got the money to execute on bringing on a contract for 1 year if we need to. But given that we've got 2 pretty big reinforcements likely coming our way over the next few months, don't feel the need to really do anything too aggressive right now. Reichert, 8 weeks away at this point. He was 2 months away 15 days ago, so I don't really know if that's significant progress or not. And Damani Essien, still 3 months away. You can see a couple of prominent minor leaguers on the ILs. You may remember Juan Palomo, who until we made that trade for Steve Nicol was likely going to be moved all the way up from high A ball to the majors. He's hit 214 and 70 at-bats, Double A Utica this year. Still 3 to 4 weeks away from a return from a torn quad. And then Jeff Frakowiak, who was our first-round pick 6 years ago in 2039, 3 months away from returning from a torn meniscus that he suffered about a month ago. Still yet to record his first victory in AAA. He was 0-3 in 4 games at the end of last season and 0-3 in 4 games for us this year before he got injured. Still think he could become a useful back of the rotation major league starter. Probably doesn't have the ceiling that we might have hoped he had when we picked him 35th overall. That said, he's still viewed as the number 95 prospect in baseball. If everything goes well, hopefully he'll be able to get a couple more starts in AAA at the end of this year, and maybe he'll be in the mix for a September call-up, especially since he's missed so much of this season. That would give us an opportunity to give him another few games pitched. Can't imagine he'll be starting for us, but maybe we could get him into 5 or 6 games, maybe get 10 innings out of him in the month of September if he's healthy then. And we decide to add him to the expanded roster. And those of you who have followed the series closely may remember that we had a young-ish outfielder, Daniel Vera, picked from us in the Rule 5 draft last November. Milwaukee has sent him back to us. He performed fine at the major league level, hit 256 with 4 doubles and 1 homer and 90 at-bats, put up a 95 WRC plus a 0.4 WAR. He still has 3 option years left, so while I don't know if we're going to add him to the 40-man roster, I don't think we will right now. And while I'm unsure of whether or not we'll protect him in the Rule 5 draft again at the end of this year, still positive to have him back in our system, and hopefully he'll remain a productive player and someone who might be able to help us if we have some more injuries at the major league level, which hopefully we won't. It's only been about 10 days since the last time we checked in. 26-20 record, 3 games behind, so still not playing incredibly, but we're holding our own. Reichert 6 to 7 weeks away, Essien 2 to 3 months away, so the time frame until we get the reinforcements is slowly but surely getting smaller and closer. And as we get close to the end of May, we did just put Mike Roberts on the IL. Only going to be out 4 days with an allergic reaction, but he's definitely regressed a bit this year. 5.74 ERA over 15 and 2/3 innings. Has struck out 23 batters, so he's striking out a lot more batters than he did a year ago. But you can see his BABIP is over 200 points higher than this year, which explains the difference in his performance. An exceptional number a year ago, an exceptionally bad number this year. Clearly, we likely could have just put him on the bench for 4 days, but since he hasn't been pitching incredibly well and we have lots of depth in our organization, we wanted to give Josh Moore his first chance. He's been unhappy that he wasn't on the major league team. 3.18 ERA and 11 1/3 innings for Albany this year. He's also a guy who, although we sent him down out of spring training, is in his last option year. So kind of want to figure out exactly what we have with Mr. Moore. So hopefully he'll get a few outings working out of middle and long relief for us over the next week and a half or so, at which point we'll likely send Moore back down to the minors and put Roberts back on the major league roster, but figured this gives us help for the next 4 days and also gives us an opportunity to kind of hopefully figure out a little better whether Moore could possibly be in our long-term plans as a middle reliever. And we've made it to June 1st now, second in the NL East with a 30-23 record, 4 games behind the Nationals. We are the number 1 wild card seed in the National League at this point, but only 2 games ahead of the Mets and the Dodgers for that final wild card spot. Nobody on the offensive leaderboard for us. Jim Lance now second in the National League in ERA, 6-3 record, 1.69 ERA. Chris Lott, third in the National League with 7 wins, 7-2 record, 3.49 ERA for the 26-year-old right-hander. And pitcher WAR, Jim Lance ranks 3rd in the National League at this point. So not surprisingly, when we look at our team statistics, the pitching still very good. 1st in runs allowed, 1st in starters ERA, although our bullpen ERA has weakened to 12th. The offense has actually improved a bit, even though we were only 14-14, 500 in the month of May. We're now up to 5th in the National League in runs scored, and we're more a middle-of-the-pack team in most offensive categories. So still don't feel an urgent need to do much of anything. We'll continue to monitor things, and as we get closer to the trade deadline over the next couple months, maybe there will be something interesting to do. As I've talked about, we've got the money to bring on a pretty significant player if they're in the final year of their contract. And being that we're in win now mode, that is certainly something that we will consider. But June 1st might be a little early to be pursuing some of those things right now. Taking a look at our check-in on Deshaun Seifu, 45 at-bats on the year now, hitting just 244, still stuck at 3 stolen bases, did add a 4th double. So a 95 WRC plus for Mr. Seifu. He's been barely above replacement level at this point. Taking a look at the career stats, 4 hits away from 3,200, 1 double away from 700, 4 triples away still from 200. Don't think he's going to get there. And he's still 5 steals away from 1,300. So he's not really going out incredibly strong, but he's also not embarrassing himself in the couple games a week that he gets into. And as we get close to the middle of June, only one game behind now, 35-25 record, 10 games over 500. A little bit of an anomaly for our excellent starting pitcher Alexis Barajas, who opted out of his contract last offseason, but we signed him to an extension. You can see he's still pretty much got the ratings and the pitching arsenal that he's always had, and he's got a 3.43 ERA over 63 innings pitched in 12 starts this year, but 0-3 record for him, despite the fact that we're 35-25 as a team. So no wins for Barajas here on June 10th, a year after leading the National League with 18. Still pitching reasonably well, although his BABIP is up to 333 after the excellent .264 it was a year ago. But not getting a lot of decisions one way or another, and kind of disappointing for a number 2 starter to not have a win at this stage of the season, but it is what it is. Team is still playing well overall, and he's pitching reasonably effectively. Still have a lot of money available to potentially take on some contracts. Take a quick look at who's available on the trade block at this point. One familiar name, Sincere Shazier, who looks like he is a closer now. Spent many years with us as a member of our starting rotation. Looks like he's become a bit of a journeyman since he moved on from us. But he was on our first 3 World Championship teams. His last year with us was the 3rd World Championship when he was 17-8 with a 3.59 ERA. Since then, he spent the last 4 years with the Brewers, the Angels, the Rangers, and most recently the Padres. We could potentially use some help in our bullpen. He's not making a ton of money, so that might be a reunion that we consider doing in the future. Other than that, no real top end pitchers available. And even at this point, I'd question whether Shazier qualifies as a top-end pitcher, but he is certainly someone who could help us. Luis Ortega, the brilliant catcher from the Phillies organization. You can see he's been an MVP, perennial All-Star, perennial Silver Slugger winner. 34 years old, fragile physically, hitting .233 this year, 6 homers and 189 at-bats. So he's been pretty much a league average offensive player after being an exceptional hitting catcher much of his career. Still competent defensively, and still looks like a bat that could be useful, making an insane $54 million this year in the last year of his contract. Says right now he's not willing to waive that no trade clause, but he is on the trade block, and maybe his view on that will change in the coming weeks. I don't know that catcher is a huge need for us, but certainly if we were to be able to add a bat like Ortega at that position, that would certainly be another way to help upgrade our offense in this win now season. And we've simmed ahead about another week and a half to the first year player draft, 43 and 27. So we're playing some excellent baseball here in the month of June. We are one game up on the Nationals in the National League East. And we are in a flat-footed tie with the Cubs for the best record in the National League, period. Interestingly, we're 8-2 in our last 10, and the Cubs are 2-8 in their last 10. So we've made up 6 games on the Cubs in the standings over the last week and a half or so. Taking a look at the league leaders here before we dip into the draft, Jim Lance still second in the league in ERA. Chris Lott tied for second in wins, and Jim Lance still third in the National League in pitcher WAR. Take a quick look at the team statistics here for us. Rank tied for fourth in the National League in runs scored, 764 winning percentage here in the month of June. I mentioned we've been playing really well, so we're kind of middle of the pack to kind of, in some cases, in the top half of the league in most offensive categories at this point. Still rank first in the National League in runs allowed, first in starter ERA. The bullpen ERA is ninth, so that is a potential area for us to consider trying to strengthen as we get closer to the trade deadline. Check in as we have done regularly on Mr. Seifu. Hasn't played too much over the first 3 weeks of June. Still stuck with 4 doubles. He has stolen another base, and he does have a triple, hitting .250 on the year, pretty close to league average offensively. Does stand now with a flat-footed 3,200 hits. He is 1 double, 3 triples, and 4 stolen bases away from the milestones that we've been talking about. Also, interestingly, he's 4 ribbies away from 900 in his career, 26 runs away from 1,800, so probably unlikely that he's going to get to 1,800 runs scored in his hopeful Hall of Fame 20-year career in the Buffalo organization. And as we get ready for the player draft, we had the best record in the regular season last year, and we also won the World Series. So we will be picking 36th, the final pick of the first round. Taking a look at the expanded draft order, though, we will have the 42nd pick also, have a supplemental first-round pick that we picked up when Eric Barbarito, our longtime starter, declined his qualifying offer and became a free agent, as we basically hoped he would. Felt like we had enough young talent in our system to potentially replace him. And the way that Jim Coles has performed thus far this year as a starter for us makes us think it was a good move to move on from Barbarito. So we'll be picking 36th and 42nd. Won't even bother looking at the top prospects. But before we finish off the episode, we'll sim ahead to our 36th pick in the draft and see who's out there. It's always helpful to get thoughts from viewers who are willing to share them on which direction we should go. And we'll have 2 of the next 7 picks when we get to our number 36 spot in the draft. So at a very high level, we see 6 5-star batting prospects and 1 5-star pitching prospect. Not expecting any of them will still be around when it's our time to pick, although the pitching prospect is extremely hard to sign, looking for a lot of money, which could work in our favor, but would doubt that he will be available. And the 5-star pitching prospect is gone. And all of the 5-star batting prospects are gone. In fact, the batting prospects look like they've been pretty popular. Not even any 4.5 or 4-star hitting prospects left at this point. So I think that the draft has gone pretty heavily to position players. Take a quick look at the draft log, And yeah, not a lot of pitchers picked so far. Looks like from a quick run through, maybe 7 pitchers picked in the first 35 picks, so 28 position players off the board. As you know, I'm always tempted by pitchers, so that could push us push us towards a pitcher this year. Take a look at the 3 top hitting prospects available, and we'll look at their. We'll take a look at these guys first, and then we'll switch over to a batting potential view. Joe Grennan, a catcher. Looks like a solid defensive catcher with potentially above average contact and home run power. Not a horrible prospect for the 36th pick in the draft. He's committed to Belmont. Not looking for crazy money. So that would not be a horrible guy to go with. A guy who looks like he could be a solid defensive catcher with a plus bat. That sounds like a potential starter if everything works out. Ron Homuth, center fielder. He's less interesting to me. He does have the same type of home run power. A few negative personality quirks. Does have good speed and really good outfield range. Looks like he could also play first base, and that would be about it. But I think I'd be leaning towards the 18-year-old catcher over the 18-year-old center fielder. And then first baseman Jim Maynard. Not much defensively. Don't love the low work ethic, and the bat does not look exceptional. He is durable. Of these 3 position players, certainly Grennan is the most intriguing to me. And taking a quick look at batting potential, a few other interesting hitters out there. Dave Bartkowski, a right fielder, competent defensively, very fast, although he's not particularly adept at stealing or base running. A good bunter coming out of USC, where he hit .302 with 10 home runs this year. Certainly looks like he could be a useful bat, and with that speed and that gap power, could definitely be slamming a wacky number of extra base hits around. You can see in his first 2 years at USC, he was double digits in doubles, triples, and home runs. Had, by his standards, a little bit of an off year this year in what will likely be his final season. Josh Boyd, right fielder, with a little pop in his bat. Josh Gerald, pretty interesting guy as far as a potential leadoff hitter. Pretty good contact and gap power potential, good speed, not going to strike out a lot. Would prefer someone who walked a little more, but he is a interesting prospect as well. The most power of anyone still available, I guess, is actually Chris Ellison, but not impressed with his very low contact and gap power potential, particularly for a college junior coming out of Arizona. He's going to struggle to hit consistently and avoid strikeouts at the major league level. But Devin Overton, a little more balanced with at least decent contact, decent home run power, the ability to draw some walks. Hammerhead Overton looks like a potentially interesting prospect as well. Eric Hrabowski, excellent defensive center fielder, durable, great outfield range, very fast. Looks like he could be a useful-ish offensive player as well. Scroll down and definitely getting to borderline interesting players at this point in terms of their potential at a very high level. Admittedly, this is a initial cursory search, and I'll be spending more time on this offline. And there's also a handful of 4-star or higher pitching prospects still available. Reliever Jonathan Bent looks like he could be an excellent reliever, but that's all he's going to be. Potentially has a fastball and screwball combination. Like some of the personality traits, like his durability, pretty good stamina for a reliever as well. So think that he could be an interesting left-hander out of the bullpen. Caleb Leamy is the highest rated starting pitcher, almost 19 years old, out of Sunrise, Florida. Doesn't look like a horrible prospect. Wish he was a little better at holding runners, but his fastball is already major league quality. Sinker not too far off. If the curve and or the changeup develop, he could certainly be a starter. If everything develops, we see him as having borderline exceptional stuff with plus movement and plus control. Definitely not a bad prospect. The reliever, Mike Hale, fastball sinker combo. Looks like he could be a useful left-handed arm out of the bullpen. Might be a bit early to take him right now. Joseph San Miguel, starting pitching prospect. Definitely borderline because we don't think his curve is going to result in anything at this point. And he's also potentially reliant on a changeup developing. So he could end up just being a two-pitch guy, which would make him likely somewhat more effective in the bullpen. Chris Spitz, exceptional potential stuff with a fastball and cutter combo. Really good personality traits, durable. Question is his movement and his control, but certainly someone to potentially think about in the later rounds. Take a look at a few other starters, or at least one other starter. Jonathan Cravener, 18-year-old out of Sweet Home, Arkansas. Left-handed pitcher, going to be reliant on the changeup developing to become a starter. If that changeup develops, he's got a lot going for him, though. Some good personality traits, good stamina, excellent at holding on runners, ground ball pitcher with a lot of movement on his pitches. Looks like he could be an interesting pitcher as well. That's kind of it for the higher-rated starting pitchers. So it's going to be an interesting decision for us. I guess since I looked at the draft pool, might as well give you the view of pitching potential as well, because I know some of you like to see this and like to opine on it, and it is helpful to me. I'll do it offline, search this way regardless, see if there's anyone who's potentially interesting out there. Definitely some higher end pitchers available. I think the pitching pool is certainly deeper than the hitting pool at this point, given that about 80% of the guys who have been picked so far are everyday players rather than pitchers. So we're going to have some interesting decisions to make. Not completely sure which direction to go right now. As I said, given that the batting pool is not incredibly deep, I could certainly see myself perhaps taking Joe Grennan, the catcher, here at number 36, and then assuming that there will probably be a pretty decent starting pitching prospect available for us at number 42. As I said, with Grennan, plus defensive ability, plus arm, and potentially really good home run power combined with the rest of his bat being competent, adds up, if he fully develops, to a useful starting catcher. So would not be the worst person in the world to pick here at number 36, but I have by no means made any decisions yet, and any thoughts and suggestions that viewers have will likely and hopefully help guide me to the right decision. But given the number of injuries we've had, the fact that we're 43-27, tied for the best record in the National League, and just a game and a half behind the best record in baseball here on the summer solstice, is pretty positive in my mind. We're getting close to the reinforcements coming. Reichert supposedly only 2 weeks away at this point. Essien still about 7 weeks away. So conceivably, we could have Reichert back by the All-Star break, even if he does have to do a little bit of rehab time in AAA Albany. And Essien, unlikely we're going to have him before the trade deadline, which complicates things a bit. Not that I'm expecting him to be horrible defensively coming off of this broken bone in his elbow. But that being said, you never know. It's his right elbow. He's a right-handed thrower, so his arm may not be quite what we thought it was for when this, or we thought it was before when the injury is done. Still think he'd certainly be an upgrade defensively over Whitehead. And he is an Iron Man in terms of his injury proneness, so even if this has a impact on him, still think he's likely to be someone who's going to be able to be out there performing for us on a pretty regular basis when he gets back. But we won't likely have the advantage of being able to see him to play any games before we get to the trade deadline, as he will most likely be back around mid-August after he does a rehab assignment. Quick look before we finish as to whether the trade block looks any different, and it doesn't seem in a substantive way that it does, although Shazier is no longer on the trade block. Wonder if he's just been taken off the block or perhaps dealt somewhere. And Shazier has been dealt to the Royals. Traded a few days ago to the Royals from San Diego. So one less option, because presumably the Royals, who are the one team that has a better record than us right now, are all in on this season and will be pretty unlikely to look to shop the guy that they just picked up. And with that, we will call it an episode. Pretty pleased with the way the team has performed given the injury issues that we have had. And in our next episode, we will dig into the draft and also likely sim up through the midway point of the season, do our usual mid-season review, and with another week or two of action, likely start putting together a more fulsome plan as to what we may or may not try to do as we approach the trade deadline. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.